We have a habit of thinking that when we go on a trip, the world freezes, that no one touches anything, that everything stays in place, waiting for our return, as if time respected our vacations. Sweet illusion. I went on a 4-day trip to a family event, far away from everything, with my cell phone not working properly and a smoke signal so I could talk to someone. That kind of forced rest that, in theory, was supposed to renew the spirit. But when I got back, I found the land as if it had been invaded by colonizers. I had left everything in order. Gate closed, padlocked, fence in the corner where it had always been, land plowed, ready to receive the next crop. But all I had to do was open the hood of the truck and look ahead for my head to start boiling. A fence, a new one, made of treated wood, with shiny barbed wire, nailed with a whimsy that only someone who didn't pay for it would have. It wasn't a crooked emergency fence. It was a fence that had been thought out, planned, put up as if it had been part of that ground since the beginning of history. The worst thing wasn't even the existence of the fence. The worst thing was where it was, in the middle of my land. Not on the border, not on the edge. It was as if someone had looked at the map of the property and thought, "Oh, I think this is nice," and driven a stake through it without asking. I got out of the truck, still trying to process the scene. I tried to convince myself that maybe it was a mistake. Maybe some new neighbor had hired someone and the mason got confused. But then I saw the sign. That blessed little sign. Property protected by HOA. Restricted access. And that's when I understood. Her, the woman across the street. The one who never stepped on the grass without her gloves on. The one who measured the height of other people's fences with a tape measure and thought that having chickens was old-fashioned and aesthetically aggressive. That's the one. It was obvious. It could only have been her. No one else in the neighborhood had the guts or the nerve to simply decide that a piece of my land could, out of the blue, become someone else's yard. It didn't take long to confirm it. When I parked in the garage, she was already there, at the gate, with a clipboard in her hand and a smile worthy of a toothpaste ad. She said, "Welcome back," in a voice so sweet it gave me diabetes. And before I could say anything, she unleashed her script. The fence is a temporary measure until we regularize the new residential zoning plan. Regularize, plan, zoning. Those words hit me like a punch. I asked her where she got that idea from, and she simply said that, according to the new proposal from the association's Territorial Organization Committee, invented on the spot, I'm sure, that part of the land was a neutral community transition area. Seriously. I stared at her for about 5 seconds, hoping it was a joke. That at any moment someone would come out from behind a tree with a camera saying it was a prank. But it wasn't. She really believed it. She believed that she could go around putting fences on other people's land based on a plan that no one had ever seen, no one had ever signed, no one had ever approved. The woman invented a bureaucracy in her head and decided that she had the right to divide my land in half. I went back inside without saying a word, not because I accepted it, but because I knew that if I said another word, I'd end up saying something that couldn't be fixed later. The anger was pulsating in my temples, throbbing like a drumbeat in the middle of my head. It was as if they had invaded not only the land, but also respect, a sense of boundaries, the minimum of civility that anyone should have. I stared out of the window until dawn, staring at that fence, like someone staring at a wound, a scar that appeared unannounced. I paced back and forth, mulling over the options. Lawsuit? Police? A meeting with a lawyer? But none of that seemed to address the urgency of what I was feeling. This thing had to go. It was simple. It wasn't hers. It shouldn't be there. It was absurd. And absurdities can't be tolerated. They have to be uprooted. And that's when the idea came to me. It wasn't elegant. It wasn't diplomatic. But it was efficient. And very, very satisfying. And it involved my tractor. The next day, I woke up with a boiling head. I didn't even sleep properly, to be honest. I spent the night rolling around in bed, mulling over every detail of that fence as if it had been driven into me instead of the earth. Because that's what these things do to us. They don't just invade physical space, they invade dignity. And when dignity is attacked, there's no talking, there's no warning, there's a response. I grabbed the bitterest coffee I could make, put on my boots, and went out to the shed. I opened the door with that cold, calculated anger. It wasn't impulse, it wasn't an outburst, it was justice. The tractor was there, quiet, sleeping as if it didn't know it was about to become the protagonist of one of the most beautiful scenes this land has ever seen. I climbed onto it like a horse before a war. I started it up, the engine rumbled loudly, and at that very moment, I felt my peace returning just by listening to that noise. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't send a message. I didn't ring the bell. I just went. Slowly, steadily, with the tractor spitting smoke, I approached the fence. The woman, of course, was already in her garden, watering plants with that face from the expired margarine commercial. She saw me on the tractor, frowned, but had no idea. Because people like that never think the consequences will come. They think they live in a little world where everything can be solved with a spreadsheet and a look of superiority. I moved the tractor closer to the first stake. I stopped for a second, just to savor the moment. Then I hooked it up, and off I went. The wood cracked, the wire flew, the structure fell as if it had been made of cardboard. The noise was so loud that even the birds stopped to watch. What about her? She ran. She ran from the garden to the edge of the plot, screaming like a headless chicken. She shouted, "What are you doing?" as if it wasn't obvious. I just kept pulling, stake by stake. No mercy, no hurry. The fence was dismantled as easily as it had been invaded. Each piece that fell was like pulling a lie out of the ground. And there she was, on the other side, shouting, waving her arms, threatening to call the police, the lawyer, the liquidator, the ambassador, the pope, I don't know. And I, like a good citizen who has already lost patience, kept working, because that's what I was doing, clearing my land, doing maintenance, correcting a mistake I didn't even make. When I'd finished tearing everything down, I piled the remains of the fence in a corner, still with the tractor running, just to show that it wasn't a scene. It was action. It was real. And when I turned off the engine, the silence that followed was otherworldly. A silence of respect, of space regained, of a soul washed clean of diesel and dust. She approached me, still out of breath, asking if I had gone mad. She said she was going to sue me, that this was vandalism, destruction of community property. Yes, she said it in those ridiculous words. And I, with the calm of someone who knows they're in the right, just replied, "The fence was on my land. It's my land. Therefore, so is the fence." And I decided to dismantle it. She was silent for a second, mute, but trembling. The kind of trembling of someone who has never been contradicted so clearly. And then, as always, came the theatrics. She said she was going to call the association, that there would be consequences, that my behavior was wild and retrograde. And all I could think was, how can someone talk so much and understand so little? I went home like someone returning from the day's work, sweaty, dirty, but light. The kind of lightness that only comes when you put out what should never have gone in. And even though I knew she wasn't going to let it go, that her next move was going to be dirtier, more bureaucratic, more poisonous, I slept like a rock that night. Because while she lives by meetings and letterheads, I live by the truth. And in the end, the truth is that no one has the right to steal anyone's floor. Least of all, someone with a clipboard and a fake smile. The next day, the calm was only a facade. I woke up to that strange silence when you know there's a bomb coming. I sensed in the air that she wasn't going to swallow the tractor without trying to give it back somehow. And that was that. Just before breakfast, I heard a knock on the gate. Not a bell, a knock. The dry, impatient kind of someone who arrives wanting to impose something. I opened the door, and there were two men in suits, their hair starched, briefcases under their arms, and looking like they've come to explain to you that your life is wrong, even though they don't know anything about it. They introduced themselves as legal representatives of the Integrated Property Association, a name I'd never heard before. They said they were there to deliver an extrajudicial notification, letterhead, gold seal in the corner, paragraph full of pretty words that basically said that I had caused material and moral damage to a community structure established by the neighbor. That was it. She had sued. And on what basis? On the basis of her fertile imagination. According to the document, the fence was a provisional measure previously agreed with members of the association to contain possible natural damage caused by soil erosion, and my action of tearing it down was classified as an act of agricultural vandalism with the potential to endanger the rural community. Seriously, agricultural vandalism. I read that and waited for the moment when the clowning would stop, but it didn't stop. It continued. I asked for compensation for psychological damage. It demanded a public retraction, and there was even an item demanding that I pay for a new fence within the HOA's environmental guidelines. And the most ridiculous thing was that, while I was reading it, she was across the street, sitting in a lawn chair, wearing that wide-brimmed hat, drinking tea from a tiny cup, as if she were watching a parade. She didn't even disguise it. She looked satisfied, as if she had won something, as if all that paperwork was a guarantee that she was going to reverse the humiliation of the tractor. But what she didn't expect was that I also have a story, that I also know how to move, and that, most importantly, I'm not scared by pretty paper. I spent the day talking to people who really understand the subject. I pulled out my property records, all up to date. I had everything digitized, measured the land with a GPS, checked the boundaries, confrontations, the history of the deeds, and even looked up the plan of the municipality. And what did I find? That the fence had invaded, yes, almost 4 meters into my land. All documented, with a stamp from the town hall and the signature of the agronomist who validated the report. Not only was she wrong, she was demonstrably wrong, with a technical report and everything. And then, in a twist of irony that only life provides, I went to the same lawyer she had tried to involve months ago when she wanted to denounce my chicken coop as a community health threat. The guy already knew me, and just hearing the case made him laugh. He said it was one of the most outlandish cases that had ever crossed his desk. He laughed until he cried when he read agricultural vandalism. Right then and there, he began to prepare his response. In the document he drew up, not only did we prove that the land was mine, but we also attached GPS photos, a map of the municipality, the notary's deed, and a copy of her first attempt to fence off the area. But what really stuck was the tractor part, because, as the lawyer explained, in the event of a proven invasion, the owner has the right to regain possession of the land, even by direct means, as long as there is no use of violence against people. And a tractor tearing down a fence doesn't count as violence. It counts as immediate repair of the property. In other words, I was completely within my rights. And as soon as she received the response notice, the tables were turned. The teacup disappeared, the hat vanished, and in place of the woman posing in the garden, a much more restrained, paler, more suspicious version appeared. For the first time, she seemed to understand that perhaps she had gone too far. But people like that don't back down. They don't apologize. They don't recognize mistakes. She closed herself off. She stopped appearing. Total silence. It looked as if the house had been evacuated. No one else on the balcony. No activity. But what seemed like a truce was only the harbinger of the final card. Because before admitting she was wrong, she'd rather become a martyr. And I was ready. Because once you've crossed a line you shouldn't have crossed, there's no point in backing down. Either you finish the journey or you die trying. Peace, when it comes after chaos, is never reliable. It smells like a trap, like something unfinished. And I knew, from her sudden silence, that something was still coming. The woman who posed with tea on the balcony wasn't going to accept the end of an imaginary reign so easily. People who live on control can't bear to lose, and when they lose, they either retreat in silence, which requires humility, something she clearly never had, or they make one last desperate lunge, the kind where they throw themselves on the ground, hoping someone will believe they've been pushed. And her shot came in the form of a police report. Yes, she went to the police station. She accused me of threatening, intimidating, destroying private property, and, the final touch, emotionally disturbing a neighborhood. She claimed that she had developed anxiety attacks and insomnia because of the truculent act of destruction of the fence. She said that the noise of the tractor caused her psychological terror, and that the scene made her relive unspecified traumas from her youth. And as if that wasn't enough, she attached photos of herself with a downcast expression, as if she were a victim of war, a real performance. But there's one thing she never understood. The victim of a lie always stumbles over her own performance. Her report became a joke among the staff at the police station, not least because, on the same day that she claimed to be emotionally shaken, she turned up at an association meeting handing out leaflets about a new collective fencing project for water security. The woman was a bundle of contradictions. I was called to testify. Of course I did. I took everything with me. The town hall report, the maps, the photos of the fence, the lawyer's document, the previous notification that she herself had given me. I spoke calmly, without theatrics, just the facts. Across the table, the deputy looked at me like he'd seen too much in his life to fall for a bored madam's argument. He wrote everything down, checked the papers, and in the end all he said was, "Well, apparently, what you destroyed was yours." I left the police station with a mixture of relief and exhaustion, because it wasn't about winning or losing. It was about not letting them make up a new story about my name. I work. I take care of what's mine. And if there's one thing I can't tolerate, it's people trying to sneak lies in, as if the truth were a matter of opinion. Over the next few days, things went downhill for her. The association began to crumble. Residents who had previously turned a blind eye began to get angry. Someone finally bothered to check out the crazy projects she had been shoving down their throats in jargon-filled meetings. And when they found out that a lot of things there had no approval, let alone legal validity, they started to demand it. There were people demanding accountability, others threatening to leave the association, and even those who wanted to sue her for mismanagement. She, of course, tried to maintain her pose. She disguised it. She smiled at a community event, organized a charity tea, pretended that nothing had happened. But inside, you could see that the castle was crumbling. The gate to the house was closed all the time. Her car, once parked in front with pride, now disappeared for days. The smiles disappeared. The invitations to meetings evaporated. She became a persona non grata, even among her friends. Then, suddenly, she left. No warning, no farewell, no closing speech. She just disappeared. One day the moving truck showed up. They loaded everything quickly. And the next thing I knew, the house across the street was empty. The woman who tried to get the better of me, who surrounded my land as if it were her own, who accused me of crimes and staged an emotional breakdown, disappeared without leaving a note. And I'm not going to lie. I celebrated. I cracked open a beer. I sat on my balcony, the same one where I spent days thinking about how to deal with it all. I looked at the vacant lot, with no fence, no encroachment, no yellow community ban sign, and for the first time in weeks, I felt the land breathing, as if the land itself was relieved to no longer have to put up with its presence. And I, even more so. Today, when I walk past the empty house, I feel a mixture of irony and gratitude. Irony because it all started with a fence she put up thinking she could divide her world from mine. Gratitude because, in the end, the fence served to show how far a person can go when they believe too much in their own importance. And I'm still here, with my land, my tractor, my peace. And if one day someone tries to invade again, you already know. Either you come back with a dialogue, or you leave with the noise of the engine. Did you like this video? Leave your opinion in the comments and your like below.